Good morning, malo elelei, talo falava, kiorana, morning turu, ali, yakwe, aloha, bula vinaka, and warm greetings from Suva, Fiji to you all. I think most of you know me, but for the benefit of those who don't know me, my name is Aquila Tawake. I'm the Deputy Director responsible for the Georesources and Energy Program here at SPC, and I'm based in Suva, Fiji. And I'm your moderator for this workshop. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you all to this peer-to-peer learning workshop. As the lead regional agency on energy in the Pacific Islands region, the Pacific community strongly encourages partnerships and networking to support the Pacific Island countries and territories in their energy transition. I must thank our partners, Mana Pacific and Blue Planet Alliance, in organizing this event for OPRA members, as well as non-members of OPRA. We look forward to a very interactive session today. Without further ado, I now invite the OPRA chairperson, Mr. Klisimasi Maasi of Tonga, to say the opening remarks, and this will be followed by a few remarks from SPC to set the scene for this workshop. Mr. Maasi, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Greetings from Kingdom of Tonga, Malolelei, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the Almighty God in our midst. The Hawaiian Public Utilities Commission's Chairman, James Griffin, representatives from SPC, representatives from Mana Pacific, and representatives from the Blue Planet Alliance. Of course, the participants from OPRA members, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to welcome you all once again to this special workshop, and I am deeply honored to present the opening remarks for the first ever OPRA peer-to-peer learning workshop with the Hawaiian Public Utilities Commission. One of the strategic objectives of OPRA is to provide a forum for energy regulators in the Pacific region, just to enhance regulatory decision through information sharing, mentoring, capacity building, and training. I guess we are all witness today that we are very grateful for having Hawaiian Public Utilities Commission and assisted by Mana Pacific and Blue Planet Alliance in organizing this workshop. I'm sure that most Pacific Island countries have their own national renewable energy target for electricity generation. Tonga was target 50% RE electricity generation by 2020, but unfortunately has been delayed due, of course, we all know the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. I like to think that the national renewable energy target for electricity generation and the independent power producer, whereas there is a PPA or power purchase agreement, share a symbiotic relationship. One where the national renewable targets relies on the IPP to deliver and reach its target. Let us all remember that the PPA document is a 20 years plus document. That is why it's very vital for all OPRA members to have a common and clear understanding of the whole process. By saying that, I would like to urge every participant that the key to make the most out of this workshop is for everyone to share their experiences on RE projects. And that is the only way. One thing to be noted, the speed of innovation technology is much faster. By saying that, it will change the way we work, where we work, how we work, that we must have kind of provision within the in place for the RE projects, that the utility do not left behind after 10 years' time and become the victims of this disruption. Once again, I'm very grateful and thank everyone for this initiative. I also commend the hard work carried out by Samantha and his team. Aquila from SPC. I wish to thank all OPRA members that have input to make this workshop to happen. Last but not the least is for all OPRA members. As a chairman, I'm very humble to ask each and every one of us to come together and push this initiative. This is what we have dreaming to have regional hub for the Pacific Regulators. All my very best wishes to you all. Hopefully this workshop will fill in our capacity when it's come to negotiation of RE projects. Malo Vito, thank you all.
Thank you so much, Chairman Masi, for that very powerful and inspiring remarks. I will now move on to the few remarks from SPC. So guest speakers, Pacific Island countries and territories, regulators, senior government officials, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to reiterate SPC's support for this workshop and our endeavor to see enhanced collaboration and coordination of initiatives and activities among partners and Pacific Island countries and territories to progress the energy transition in the Pacific Islands region. Under the Framework for Energy Security and Resilience in the Pacific, or FSRIP, priority initiative number 8 is on cooperation in sustainable and resilient energy with other island regions. In the past, there had been little effort to learn substantially from the experience of the Caribbean, Hawaii, and others, and incorporate appropriate lessons into Pacific actions. We need to rectify this problem and enhance our collaboration with other island regions. Cooperation and exchange arrangements will be explored and developed between the crop agencies of the Pacific and the Caribbean, Hawaii, and possibly other areas such as the Atlantic, Indian Ocean, and South China Sea. Further, priority initiative number 17 of the FSRIP relates to independent energy regulation. The presence of an independent energy regulator in any country is necessary to provide regulatory advice and oversight for the electricity subsector, and in some countries, the wider energy sector, including petroleum and liquid fuel. I'm confident that the experience and insights that will be shared by the chairman of the Hawaii Public Utility Commission and the Blue Planet Alliance today will help all the Pacific Island countries and territory energy regulators who are present here today. This peer-to-peer learning is the first under the FSRIP and certainly will not be the last. We are grateful to ADB for its funding support to OPRA. Under the ADB technical assistance, OPRA members will enjoy more capacity building initiatives, policy alignment, and technical support in the next 2 to 3 years. This type of intervention, whether it be peer-to-peer learning or an exchange arrangement, will complement ADB's technical assistance and ultimately strengthen the capacity of energy regulators in the Pacific. SPC looks forward to strengthening its partnership with Mana Pacific, the Blue Planet Alliance, as well as with other partners in our effort to assist the countries in the region to realize their energy transition. Thank you very much. Okay, fellow participants, please be reminded that if you want to ask any questions during the session, you are most welcome to do so, but please write them in the chat box. Yeah, and then one of us, either myself or Masi or Sam, will then read them out at the end of each session. And there will be two Q&A sessions. The first one will be soon after the next session, the PUC session. And then the second Q&A session will be the last session of the day with the plenary discussion. Okay, let's move on to the next session. I'm pleased to introduce Mr. James Griffin, the chairman of the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission. Mr. Griffin will discuss the PUC's participation in Hawaii's plan to cost-effectively transition to 100% renewable energy, share lessons learned as a regulator. Mr. Griffin, you are hereby invited to make your intervention. Thank you so much.
Hi, can you hear me? Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear, sir.
Great. Aloha, good morning. I think good afternoon for some of you, or at least for those of you in Hawaii. It's great to be a participant here in this peer-to-peer workshop. It's great to hear the interest in further reaching out to Hawaii and the Caribbean. We've had our commission's had a relationship with our brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico, sharing island lessons. And so I hope this is the start, similar relationship with Pacific Island nations as well. Thank you for the introduction. So you said I'm the chair of the Hawaii PUC. I've been in this role for 3 years, almost 3 years now, in a little over a month. But I've been in different capacities in our commission for almost 10 years now. I came on board as the head of our the chief of our policy and research section. I'll talk about that in a little bit, in how important it is to invest in your commissions during this transition. And was later appointed by our governor to be a commissioner back in 2017, and after about 2 years became chair. So that's a little bit about my background. I've been in legislative and research capacities in renewable energy for over 20 years. I've worked in our state legislature here when we passed the first renewable portfolio standard law. I worked as a researcher at our university on grid modeling, renewable integration. So that's a little bit of my background. And as I said, almost since 2012, I've been in different roles here at our commission. So I've posted here in the chat a PDF of what I call my presentation, but really this is just a what I hope will spur discussion among the group here. It's not intended to be, a detailed lecture about everything Hawaii's done in the past 10 years. I think you'll probably hopefully see a lot of the parallels to what's going on in your islands, what's going on in your country. As the moderator said, please feel free to ask as many questions as you can in the chat. And really this is intended to start the dialogue and just based on our experiences. And I will, the risk of, here we go. Okay, hopefully everyone can see okay?
Yeah.
Great, okay. So I just want to give a quick overview of Hawaii's energy situation. And then the structure of this, I'm going to give you a little more insight into how we're currently seeing 100% renewable operations in the islands. Hopefully that'll be exciting for you to see what the island of Kauai is doing. And then I've put together what I called 5 different insights, and these are personal. I want to be clear, it's not kind of the official position of our commission. These are really things that, as I sat back and reflected on what I've learned in this role as a chair and what I've been a part of in my time in the commission, hopefully what I can help see, impart to the group here, maybe see what's coming on the horizon for you. And it's really intended to spur the discussion of the group here. So for a very quick overview for those of you that are not as familiar with Hawaii, we are also a string of islands, 6 separate electricity systems run by 4 different electric utilities, but they're really structured as 2 different companies. One is a member-owned cooperative on the island of Kauai, all the way to the top left of the graph here. And so this is a fairly small system. As you can see, it's about an 80 megawatt peak. And they've been very aggressive, I'll show quickly, in their integration of utility scale solar. And they have our highest level of renewable energy use in the state, last year reaching 67% for the year. But you'll see quickly in the middle of the day, they're operating at 100% renewables almost every day and have been doing that for about 2 years now. Next, we go to the island of Oahu, where we are here. This is the population center. You can see the system peak is a little over 1 gigawatt. Moving on to the other islands, to the very smallest ones, Molokai, Lanai, very small populations, very rural islands. These have about 5 megawatt peak systems. The islands of Maui and Hawaii Island are roughly about 180 to 200 megawatt peaks. And I think what we all share in common is, we're all heavily oil dependent. Island of Oahu runs primarily on low sulfur fuel oil. We have 1 coal plant that we're retiring, and then you'll see here the rest was renewables at about 30%, most of that being wind and a large amount of rooftop solar and some recently integrated utility scale renewable utility scale solar projects. The other islands, it's a different mix. Hawaii Electric Light on the Big Island has a geothermal plant that is coming back online, as well as other solar, hydroelectric resources. Maui Electric has a large share of wind, making up its 51%, as well as solar. And the island of Kauai has been our leader. And I'm going to show you a little bit here. I like to show this in graphs, particularly with groups of other regulators. And this is really to give you a sense. People talk about what it looks like, or we talk about the future of 100% renewable system, and it seems like a far off, a distant goal. And what I'm showing you here is that this is representative of operations on the island of Kauai really every day for the past 2 years. And so this is a graph of their system dispatch. So on the x-axis here is the demand and energy supply at different times of the day. On the left, starting at midnight, on the right, at the end of the day. And what you see, everything in gray is currently delivered by oil-fired units. These are all diesel-run combined cycle unit and a couple of combustion turbines. The green is about a 7 megawatt biomass plant. Blue is some hydroelectric plants that are generally older. And everything in the middle is solar, a combination of rooftop solar, a utility scale solar, and then utility scale solar combined with battery storage. And what you see, particularly in the evening times, you see solar there. And these are 2 these are projects now where the batteries are dispatching the solar in the evening period. So they actually have an excess of solar in the middle of the day. And with each successive project, they're shifting more of that into the evening and into the morning hours. And so the way I view this is really the abundant solar resource spilling out from the middle of the day, being stored and now dispatched in the evening, in the morning periods, and eating into the oil. There's 2 more projects coming. And so after this year, this island will be at about, I believe it's about 80% renewable with a third solar plus storage project. And we have a pending application for a combined pumped hydro storage with solar and battery storage as well. And with that project, this island will get to approximately 90 to 95% renewables estimated by 2025. And so basically what you're going to see is the rest of the gray here fill in with yellow, stored either through battery storage or pumped hydro storage. And another thing to notice is if you look in the middle of the day, you see the really spiky behavior. These are basically you're seeing the variability of the solar projects offset by the battery storage systems that are being used to smooth out, keep frequency stable as they're seeing the variation in the solar. And so it's impressive to watch. This company or this utility is basically turning off all of their fossil fuel generators in the middle of the day. You see nothing online there. They're back down to their minimums. And they're operating purely on these couple of renewable resources plus the solar and the batteries. And the batteries are really the ones providing all of the stabilization, the frequency stabilization, as well as the quick ramping to maintain, to keep the lights on in the system. So as you can see in the graph, this is one of the first days they did this back in 2019. And they've, during the pandemic 2020, they've been operating up to 6 to 8 hours a day in this pure 100% renewable operation. So basically you're seeing the middle of the day expand out into other parts of the morning and the evening. So again, I show this, I think all of our governments share, in our case, we have 100% renewable goal. A lot of people wondering how to get there. And what we're seeing is, I mean, this is the kind of fundamental operations that we see on this island. And I get to when we look at the new projects proposed for the rest of our islands, they will in one form or another look like this. We'll have a set of resources operating in a kind of baseload capacity and a variety of different renewable sources backed up with energy storage to provide 100% operation in the middle of the day. So hopefully this is exciting. It's a glimpse into the future. This is the future that's happening every day here in Hawaii now. And so those lessons are important. Lots of technical lessons going on with how to integrate these systems, how to fine tune the storage systems and the different algorithms for maintaining frequency and voltage. So we encourage questions and for you to reach out to folks here, but it's also the companies working on this that are learning through these projects. Tesla and AES are the two major contributors to these. And so we're seeing their technology spread on the lessons learned for the other islands. So what I want to now talk about are, I've tried to structure this into just what I called five key insights I've learned in my time at the commission. I say it's key insights from the first half of our journey to 100%. Last year, we reached a little over 35% total renewables in the state. But when you look at the projects that are currently planned to come online in the next couple of years, we'll shortly be at 50% in total. And at least 3 of the islands, Kauai, Maui, Hawaii Island, it will be easily up to 80% plus renewable operations on an annual basis. Molokai, Lanai looking to hopefully get there fairly quickly as well. So we're going to see a big leap forward, the integration of more projects. And so I've laid out, and I'm just going to go talk through each 5 of these points with a few example slides of things that we've worked on, and again, to spark discussion. So the first one, which I alluded to, is our state entered into agreement with the federal government and our utilities back in 2008. It was known as the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative. And this set the first really aggressive goals, a 70% clean energy goal for the state, a 40% renewable goal, 30% energy efficiency goal. And one of the key parts of that agreement was to get technical assistance to the state, but to the credit of my predecessors, two prior chairs of the commission, they recognized that the regulatory commission really needed to step up our internal capacity, have a very solid understanding of renewable energy technologies. And so the commission needs to be on an even knowledge basis with utilities, if not leading at times. So over 10 years, we've, through my predecessors, myself, have invested heavily staff knowledge, sending staff to trainings, having expertise available to us. And, that really is a long-term, or that has been a long-term project here at the commission. When I look back at who I started with when I was here 10 years ago, we have really, I would say, overhauled most of our staff. A lot of them would now come in. We have people coming from all over the United States to come work here because they're excited about the work that's happening in Hawaii. And so I think the point is my predecessors were smart enough to know that this was a need. They went out and reached out for assistance. They got a lot of support from the U.S. Department of Energy and through our national lab system. I see through the partnerships here, this is something that's already been going, but I implore you to, follow that investment in the staff here has paid off substantially, and I'm fortunate to benefit from that. We have about 60 people on staff. A lot of them fairly new. A lot of them come to our commission now with extraordinary backgrounds and a lot of expertise in this area. Very happy to talk about that further. But something that commission leadership understand, but it's hard to pull off in practice, and it's hard to sustain that over the long term. So happy to talk further about that. Any questions that you have, how we've paid for that, how we funded that. Insight number 2, this seems maybe straightforward to a lot of people on the outside, but one of the key parts of our clean energy initiative has been regulatory reform at each step of the way. Going back in 2009, a decoupling mechanism was instituted as part of the new clean energy policies. And what our commission has just recently finished was a comprehensive review and reform of our regulatory framework with instituting a performance-based regulation framework replacing the traditional cost of service framework. And what I'm showing here is a graph that when one of our workshops, we invited the investor community to come talk to us about what was important to them to see in a utilities framework. They were usually the most timid about making substantial changes to any regulatory framework. They want to see stability. They want to see a low risk environment that the utilities that they invest in have established by their regulatory community. So this was a shocking presentation that we received during one of these workshops where we invited the analyst that works for Moody's that covers our investor-owned utility, Hawaiian Electric, to give a presentation. And he started off by this, what you see here in the slide: cost of service regulation, traditional utility regulation leads utilities down the wrong path. There's a lot of literature on this, but fundamentally what he's pointing out was that in a traditional cost of service model where utilities long-term earnings based on their rate base, capital base, they have strong investment or strong incentive to only want to invest in that themselves, discourage other private investment, whether it's an IPP or customer-based resources. And he, as a investor or as a debt analyst, saw this as taking the whole industry in the wrong direction. So he was, again, it was shocking. It was something that we'd been working on for a while, something that we had, I think, had been apparent to us, but was not readily embraced by the investor community. So what I want to say is this has been spreading throughout the U.S. mainland here, but something that we invested a ton of time in to over 2 years investment by our commission to do this overhaul. And really, I think the idea is to help pave the path forward with much stronger incentives for our utilities here to invest and embrace not just renewable technologies that they build, but any third-party investment through IPPs or, again, customer rooftop systems. And so we can talk more about what those regulatory reforms look like. This slide here has a summary. Very quickly, we put in a revenue cap for about half the utilities revenues. They're non-fuel, non-purchase power costs. And so this provides a strong cost control mechanism. On the clean energy side, we've set up a number of different performance incentive mechanisms, generally incentive payments tied to reaching certain goals, as well as an investment adder for any types of renewables coming onto the system, whether it's third party, whether it's, well, this is to try and offset the utilities' own incentive to build their own infrastructure. So if it's a third party system, if it's a rooftop system, there's opportunity for the utility to earn a return on that as well. We have some safeguard protections for the utilities returns, which we can talk about further. This was something that was of very strong interest to utilities as well as the investor community. And so point being, throughout our over 10 years of clean energy transition, utility reform, regulatory reform has always been viewed as a necessary part of it. We've gone through a few different iterations. This is our most recent, most comprehensive version. The new framework went into place in 2021. And so it's a 5-year plan. And we're very much in the middle of seeing how this works while we're trying to integrate a new set of projects and programs. Insight number 3, I heard, I believe it was the chairman talk about the importance of PPAs and long-term agreements and IPPs. And so one of our lessons, it's been a strong focus of my time at the commission, is to really bolster our framework for competition for, well, really of all different types. We've had a competitive bidding framework for power purchase agreements in place for over 15 years, but it was never tried until recently. All of the agreements, power purchase agreements that came to our commission prior to the most recent competitive solicitations we've done were done through bilateral negotiations. I think our observation there was the prices that came in through those negotiations came very close to our avoided cost of energy. So it was a easy benchmark for what, and probably shared by a lot of us here, where our avoided generation is based on oil. These companies are coming in, seeing their bench a 20 cent per kilowatt hour or so benchmark, and pricing, establishing pricing just below that. So we had a history of that, a very difficult position to be in as a regulator. You have no other benchmarks to really compare what these agreements come in under bilateral negotiations like that. So we've made a strong focus in since 2017, after we accepted our utilities' most recent plans. We've had 2 rounds of competitive bidding, which have resulted in, I put here, 19 projects throughout the state. These are all solar. Right now, these are all solar projects paired with energy storage. A couple of them are standalone energy storage projects. The pricing benchmarks now look much closer to industry pricing that we see on the US mainland. So we've gone from an avoided cost basis to, I think, much closer to what we see or would expect through competitive pricing based on the agreements we see negotiated in other parts of the US. And what you see here, these are record low prices for our state, but more importantly, very favorable compared to the cost of oil that we're displacing. So lifetime net savings are estimated a little over $1.25 billion for the whole portfolios. And these are similar to what I showed you in the Kauai graph. These will take our other islands, the energy, the solar energy in the middle of the day, allow us to dispatch that in the evenings, in the morning periods, allow us to retire some fossil fuel plants on each of the islands. So important interim steps for us. Same time, we've encountered significant delays in interconnection studies of bringing these online, as well as the COVID supply chain delays. So unfortunately, these are delayed at the moment, but very important progress for us in the state, being able to build new solar projects to displace oil. I also put in here, and I'll talk a little bit about it more, but we have very high levels of rooftop solar adoption on every island. And one of the things that we looked at, not just utility scale renewable projects, but we've looked at how we can aggregate those resources and make them available to the utility. And so we have different agreements that the different companies have come in to aggregate these resources. A lot of, again, rooftop solar backed with batteries, but also controllable water heaters, controllable thermostats. So these companies have come in and aggregated thousands of different customers and made them available to the utility as a capacity-based resource and a fast frequency response resource, again, to complement the other resources that we have online. And really what we've seen in the near term, and this has been backed by different analysis that we've done, the capacity value of these resources is equivalent to a traditional dispatchable generator. So 1 megawatt of solar plus storage, whether it's utility scale project or an aggregated distributed resource, we find has the same reliability value as a oil fire generator or a coal steam plant. And so that's what's allowing us in the near term to feel more comfortable with retiring and replacing these resources. That relationship doesn't hold indefinitely. The ability to continue to doing that, particularly just with solar, you reach a saturation point where you start to run into problems if you have cloudy days. That's why we've seen our utility on Kauai move towards being able to basically a long-term storage asset with their pump storage hydro project. So we're looking at, as a near term, these are all 4-hour battery storage projects. We have one project that's actually an 8-hour battery storage project. I think the first that we've seen in the industry for batteries proposed for that long. So we're seeing that 4-hour resource provides significant benefit, like you saw in the Kauai graph, but it's not the only solution. We're going to need a mix of resources. We're going to need a range of different energy store. The duration of energy storage projects will need to expand into the future. So very happy to talk more about this. I hope most of your islands are looking at similar type projects. We've also used a new type of power purchase agreement it's basically a capacity-based payment for the facility, so that the utility is just paying to have the dispatchability of the resource available, not just the delivery of the energy. So we've had, I think, good response to that contract type. It takes the risk of curtailment of the facility off the hands of the developer. So happy to talk further about those contract types, as well as the competitive processes we've worked through to bring these projects forward. Okay, just 2 more points, and then hopefully a lot more question and answer. This I think was probably, again, obvious for folks that live on islands, but something I reiterate to particularly my fellow colleagues on the mainland. But in each of our cases, or in each of our islands, there's no other interconnection, either obviously to the US mainland, but no interconnection between the islands. So each island's electricity system needs to support itself. And so that we have a unique set of resources on each island. On the Hawaii Island, we have abundant geothermal potential, a lot of difficulty in accessing and developing that, but probably the most amount of renewable resources, broadest resource base. We have other islands that are much more limited. So each island, our combination of resources to get to the 100% goal is going to differ. And that needs to be a conversation among the different residents, communities on those islands. There's different levels of acceptability. One thing I want to reiterate, I want to be clear, we have a very high amount of rooftop solar, very popular in our state, and particularly because we need to meet these goals by the resources on each island, the customer resources, the demand side resources are just as critical. So we have a long history of energy efficiency programs here. Our commission actually contracts, those programs have been put under the jurisdiction of our commission, taken out of our utilities management. So we oversee a contractor to run those programs. as well as the different, and with oversight of the utilities programs to interconnect rooftop solar systems. I talked about the aggregated distributed resource demand response resources. So we see these are going to be just as critical to reaching these goals, and to be clear, not to underestimate, undervalue the benefits from them, particularly when we're looking with a focus on resilience of our systems, resilience to storms, more frequent storms, more frequent critical events. So having those localized resources, whether it's at a home or a community level, I think is we're continuing to see the importance of that. And so this, we're not just looking at meeting these goals through large projects. We're going to need the customer side, the demand side, to be just as advanced as well as the others. Just the other two, I find, our state is also has set very aggressive clean transportation goals. So I have to remind people that we're going to meet 100% in the electricity sector and decarbonize the transportation sector. We need to be planning for, really producing clean power for beyond just what you would view as the traditional 100% of demand. So if we're going to electrify, we have roughly about a third of our oil use in the transportation sector, another third for electricity sector. So we really need to be thinking about double the amount of energy demand as well to meet any clean electricity demand for the transportation sector. So something to keep in mind, that you need to be planning for a benchmark that's higher than your energy demand today. If your governments as well are looking at diversifying those sectors, which I assume is the case. We're all looking at displacing imported oil and finding cleaner, more cost competitive sources. And just goes back to the conversation I started with. We're to do all this, we're looking at, we're running industry leading grid planning efforts that on island systems, they're so tightly connected. We need to be looking at the most advanced planning and analytical tools in planning for this in the future. So we've had about a year and a half docket open, looking at very advanced electricity integrated planning across the generation, transmission, distribution systems, but as well as cross sectors for transportation and electricity. Okay, and then just the final one, what we're learning, and certainly when I compare the conversations happening today and reaching our clean energy goals, this is a community-wide endeavor. It's not a technical or just economic or kind of regulatory wonk discussion. How do we integrate solar and wind and bring that online? We have lots of different, the kind of social political elements playing into this, that as a regulator, you need to be cognizant of all of it. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful. So to point out some of the obvious, we started this because fossil fuel dependence, it does create it's an unequal burden, whether it's on your island, the different parts of the islands affected by it. When we see sea level rise, it's certainly having disproportionate effect certain parts of the world. But what I've seen is, we need broad-based support and participation to sustain the initiatives for the long term. We've had 3 administrations now that our executive leadership here in the state, our governors, through our clean energy initiative, they've all strongly supported it. Fortunately, they have different perspectives on the priorities, but fortunately, everyone has been supportive. But we have had some highly controversial projects, and how those projects are handled, and what I would say the community's acceptance of the government authority making these decisions really becomes more important, more prominent as we go along. They have to have confidence that people in our shoes are making decisions in their benefit. I guess is the better way to put it. And the more that's undermined, the more that's frayed, the harder our job is, the harder job it is for everyone to do this. And so this has been a personal lesson. We have a wind project that was highly controversial. The turbines were installed. They needed police escort to get from the port to the area they were installed. We had hundreds of protesters show up at our commission, show up in our hearing room. And I think the residue of those decisions are going to still affect the future. There's not very much strong support for any further wind development, at least on this island. So that's, again, something important to keep when you think about limits. Now the conversation about community impacts of projects are far more prominent, and our commissions had to be far more on the forefront in how we take that into account in planning future solicitations, as well as handling our decision-making on any individual project. So again, that's something, you're not, when I went to regulator school, that's not something that's taught to you about rate making, about making decisions, but what I see is critical to the future. There has to continue to be broad-based public support for the initiative, as well as the communities hosting projects have to want to continue to support them. And so being on islands, I think we all deal with this in one form or another. You can't build the projects hundreds of miles away and import the power. And with that, I offer these my personal lessons and insights, and very much look forward to hearing from what you're dealing with on your islands. And I've left my contact information here. Please view this as an introduction. If you have further questions, I'm very happy to answer them personally, or track down staff members, or just share what we've been working on. And with that, I will unshare and see what questions have come up.
Thank you so much, Jay, for sharing the PUC experience and insights. Thank you so much for that. So we'll go to the Q&A session now. I note that there are a few questions in the chat box, but I will first give the opportunity to the opera members or to the regulators throughout the Pacific region. If someone would like to ask any question now to Jay, please feel free to ask your question now.
Oh, I'm sorry, Aquila. I thought we just posted on the chat, and then so you want me to?
Yeah, I can read out to your, or you can read out Tuti your question.
Okay.
To do that. Yeah.
Thank you. Tuti Chilton. I'm from Palau. Our electricity services is not as big as what we have in Hawaii. Our peak is about 12 megawatts. So we're very small, with about a 30 megawatt capacity that we have now in 2 different sites for the generators. My question is actually two questions in one. One is just in terms of experience, have you experienced any technologies with green hydrogen as well as OTEC? And number 2, is Hawaii Public Utilities Commission also regulating water and wastewater as a utilities corporation? Those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuti. Just as a compare, I think I pointed to our 2 islands of similar size, or about half Molokai, Lanai. And so, yeah, I think we also understand the other challenges, opportunities, the very small islands. You can make a big kind of leap forward, but there's trying to keep the lights on with these small systems is challenging. So on the first 2, green hydrogen, OTEC, our state has a long history in research projects on both of those. On the Big Island, Hawaii Island, we have a test site, OTEC test site. It's gone through different iterations, but still not we have no commercially operating, OTEC system. They have a heat exchanger test going on. They have installed they have a deep sea pipeline that they installed with the hopes of future development. But so that's it's been a 30, 40 year kind of progress in developing that test site, as well as the technology tests there. In the research institute I used to work in, we also had a marine research, a National Marine Research Center funded by U.S. Department of Energy, where OTEC research was a big part of that, focused on those. We have had different seawater air conditioning proposals come up in the state here on this island, but none of them are commercially viable. Obviously, it's a variant on OTEC. And then green hydrogen, also something, there's been a ton of research here. We have demonstration projects. And, you know, I'm closely watching the development in the industry on this topic. I think, you know, if you look at how battery storage and hybrid projects have evolved, you know, I saw a recent announcement, a couple demonstration projects of hybrid hydrogen projects coupled with solar and wind. So I think, you know, the short is we're watching closely, and, you know, again, the synergies are there. I actually, when I was at the university, worked on a patent looking at how, you know, we can use an electrolyzer as a load management tool and use the hydrogen fuel for all sorts of different purposes. You know, there's potential there beyond, you know, for transportation fuel, for electric generation, stored fuel. So I think that the opportunities there, it's looking more promising than it has in the past. Again, the critical part is getting the very low cost, accessible, renewable fuel to create the hydrogen, which is continues to progress. And so I think, you know, that these are technology we're looking at closely, but haven't seen a commercial proposal yet. And then, okay, you said water, wastewater. Yes, I didn't talk about, so our commission regulates 1,800 different entities. A large number of those are motor carriers, but we have 39 private water and wastewater utilities. For the most part, the county governments, the local governments are providing water, wastewater on the island. So those are municipally run utilities. But for utility, wastewater systems that are off of their grid, off of their system, these have historically been small private developments. You know, they don't want to pay to hook up to the municipal system, so they have a small on-site water, wastewater system. These are around some of our different resorts and subdivisions. So we regulate about 30, like I said, 39. I can tell you right now, we have one on West Maui. They're in a very critical water shortage situation. A lot of them are older facilities. They don't necessarily keep up with their investment in maintenance of the plant. So it's there's only 39, but they've caused as many gray hairs as the large utilities that we deal with. Usually then whenever we have a problem with them, this last week we have, you know, people not getting water, which keeps you up at night. So I'm not sure why you asked, but yeah, we do that as well. Economic regulation of them. So we regulate their rates. We have different agencies that regulate the water supply and the water quality. But they all interact together. So
yeah, thank you,
Thank
Jay.
you, Jay.
Tuti, you have a follow-up question?
No, I just want to explain why I asked about the waste and water, because we're an energy regulatory body, and now there's talk that we're supposed to become a water and wastewater regulatory body. Instead of a Palau Energy Administration, we're going to become a Palau Utilities Administration, something like that. So I just wanted to just make sure I get networked out so I have an understanding of who to reach out to once we start to be forced to regulate water and wastewater, because that's something that I'm still learning with the rest of the opera members how to regulate and electricity. Now I'm being asked to do waste and water. So when I say me, I mean the office I work out of. So thanks. Thank you very much, Jay.
So what I always take, if you're being asked to do more, you're doing a good job. But
Thank you, Jay. Yeah, we'll move on to the next question. There's a question on the chat box from Fred of Inalco in Vanuatu, and the question is, what is the percentage of rooftop solar generation for the day or for one day in I don't know whether in one island or overall throughout Hawaii. Thank you, Jay.
I got to go off of my, so it's roughly, those graphs I was showing, it was roughly about half of that in the middle of the day is rooftop solar. On an energy basis, shoot, I had it up. I want to say it's around 15% on an annual energy basis. So it's significant here. I thought I had, okay. So I'm going off the top of my head, but roughly speaking on a nameplate capacity basis, because we don't, these systems are not individually monitored like a large power plant. So, you can see the general impact on the grid's load curve, but we don't actually get the output from each of these. But on a nameplate capacity, we're looking at about it's it's about, depending on the island, usually 50%. The nameplate capacity is 50% of the peak, if not more. Like Maui and the Big Island are well over 120 megawatts now, and those are 180 to 200 megawatt systems, and still growing, not as quickly as it was when we had full retail net energy metering, but significant contributor. And then recently a lot of these systems are now paired with storage, and so their dispatch is similar to the others. They're shifting their load into the evenings, and that's what we've been looking at with some of the different enlisting these resources now into utility grid services programs. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. I have a question for you in relation to the your geothermal plant on the Big Island. I know it's an active volcano. You must have a huge or significant geothermal potential for power generation on the Big Island. But you also mentioned that there are challenges in the geothermal power generation on the Big Island. I just want to know, what's the current size of your geothermal plant, and what's the potential for future expansion? If it's a active volcano, and then I think the potential for geothermal will be significant.
Yeah. Okay. So if right now we have a 38 megawatt geothermal plant. It's on the eastern side of the Big Island where the active volcano is. Wish I had to pull the, well, you have to bear with me. So it's on the eastern side of the island where it is active volcano there. It's also a rural part of the island. So you have to get the power from that area into the transmission grid. And so the main load centers, one is about 30, 40 miles up the coast. The other one is all the way on the other side of the island. And so there's, so we have a proposal to expand that plant from 38 megawatts to 46. Still an active decision we haven't finalized yet, but there's two sides to an active volcano. That plant went offline 2018. Lava flow covered the whole surrounding area. Local transmission lines have been affected twice, and literally it flowed around just around the base of the plant. So it didn't cover up, totally destroy the plant, but at the time to the plant was filled, the borehole, the wells were filled. And so in the past 2 years, that plant's been coming back online. It finally is, looks like by the end of this year, it'll be all the way back up to or close to its 38 megawatt potential. And then they're looking at repowering and expanding up to the 46. When you look at the, geothermal resource potential, it's far, showed that island has about a 200 megawatt peak. In theory, the potential far exceeds that. It's gigawatts of capacity. But as it's not, it's where the active volcano is, far from the load center. You'd have to transmit it up there. A lot of historic community opposition to the project there, a whole other set of considerations. And people have looked at trying to develop geothermal on other parts of the island. There's not been a commercial entity interested in that. If what people, once you get to know the geothermal industry, it's really the risk is all in doing the exploratory well drilling. And so nobody's invested any capital in trying to develop new sources away from where the existing ones have been. There have been a few iterations of plans to try and build undersea cables from the Big Island to the other islands. We had a version of that 10 years ago. So all of it goes to show on paper, there's really probably enough potential to power the state. In practice, we have a significant resource. When that plant is fully up and operating, it provides about 30% of the Big Island's electricity, baseload power. And so it's a, if you have the opportunity, it's a valuable resource, but in our case, it's been a challenge. And again, I point to, the plant was almost totally overrun by the last lava flow. And so
Thank you, Jay. Just a related question. You talked about the the hydrogen research, ongoing research that I think PUC and others have been participating on it over the years. Have you considered harnessing hydrogen from the geothermal sources as a potential source for hydrogen for future use?
Short answer is yeah. The one of the demonstration projects on the Big Island was looking at just that, and they've I think moved it, but they're looking at running the local bus system. They've retrofitted some of the buses there to run on hydrogen, and had a deal worked out with the geothermal plant there to supply them with excess power. But that was prior to the lava flow inundating the plant as well. So the short is yes, but the other thing to think about with hydrogen production, it can be independent of location, meaning if you're just plugging into the grid, right, because electrolyzer is just a big load source. It doesn't necessarily have to be right next, co-located to the plant. And so you may want to think, but you have to work out the right deal for the power. And we've been looking at, or one thing that hasn't been considered yet, but seems to be an opportunity out there in two of our newest solar projects on the Big Island. They're all located in the western part of the island. They're concerned about high voltage on the transmission lines due to the projects right there. And to me, that says that's a good location for a big load. So I think, I think that's where the regulators fit in here, is that these projects don't necessarily have to be co-located. If you develop the right pricing for the electricity from it, you can develop a low cost rate for curtailed power. You can build electrolyzer close to where the demand is, not necessarily where the supply is.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. May I ask Savnil of Fiji? I note that you have two questions in the chat box. You may wish to ask your questions, please. Savnil, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, please.
Hi, Jay. My question is related to the tariff, mostly for the renewable energy, the power generated. Just like in Fiji, we regulate and review the tariff every 4 years. What is the term you guys use for the mostly for the solar and hydraulic system like that.
So maybe I can clarify, when you say regulate the tariff, is that these projects are built under a feed-in tariff type arrangement where they're paid a fixed rate, set by the commission? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so we had a program like that. It's fully subscribed now. Those terms were 20 years, but we haven't revisited it. Instead, we've moved more towards for projects 5 megawatts and larger, we have competitive bidding for them. And so under those, the utility will put out a solicitation, and the developers will propose generally a 20 to 25 year term, the price for it. And then those projects are selected through that process and come before the commission for approval. And so that way it's the pricing's updated based on what is needed at the time of the solicitation.
So that simply means that the price, the tariff remains same for that period of time, that is for 20 to 25 years.
Correct. It's done on a contract term basis. So, but I guess I would say they're not the same. We have, I showed a range of the prices. And so they have to compete against each other.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And what we've seen is the pricing varies by island. Actually, the highest costs are coming in on this island. Just the land costs are higher.
Okay. Because I think in Fiji soon we will be having some solar projects, the same contract, I think the same system. We're gonna use it here in Fiji as well. So just wanted to know about you guys.
And I can maybe talk. So what we have in our case, the utility still runs a solicitation. The commission hires an independent observer to review that RFP and to oversee the conduct of it, as well as the evaluation. I know in other settings, the commission actually runs the solicitation. In our case, we've still partially left it in the utility's hands. It's still extremely complicated and contentious at times. We've had, various different complaints about developers against the utility. So I don't want to understate that. We've seen good results, but it's a huge undertaking on our side, and still pretty challenging when we just had a project pull out of their agreement, and oftentimes ends up in litigation between the utility and sometimes with the commission.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. We have 2 more questions in the chat box, and then we'll ask those 2 questions for Jay to respond to, and then we'll move on to the next session. So Jay, the first question there by Perlini of Samoa: how is Hawaii Authority monitoring the individual rooftop solar projects tariffs, net metering or net billing?
So we have a number of different programs. We started with the energy metering, the full retail net energy metering. In 2015, we closed that and moved to a number of different successors, which are all basically a version of net billing. If I'm, understanding that my understanding, the interpretation is the same as yours, and they were largely a wholesale export rate for any exports from the home or business. Self-consumption is still kind of all behind the meter. We have been looking at a couple of different time varying versions of that, particularly with the projects paired with storage, as well as what we call self-supply, a version where, if you consume all of the electricity on site, you have a faster interconnection process, and it's just offsetting retail rates. So we have a number of different flavors here. I think the complaint about them is they're all pretty complicated to follow, and the terms change over time. But we basically moved the exports from full retail compensation to some version of a wholesale type rate, based on avoided cost of energy. Whoop, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Jay. The last question is from Tangi of Cook Islands. What your term of the power purchase agreement in terms of time? 3 years or 5 years or so? Thank
The
you.
utility scale ones have been 20 to 25. The aggregated distributed resource ones have been 5 years. I think there's a lot of interest in seeing that expand. We're also watching something newer on the mainland, looking at shorter terms, right? I mean, the longer the term, the more you can amortize the costs, generally better pricing, but there's some advantages to having flexibility of a shorter term. So I've been watching carefully some of the utilities on the mainland look at pricing for 10 or 15-year contracts, and I think over time you want to have some combination of these.
Yeah. Thank you, Jay. I think we have to move to the next session now. But okay. Masi. Yeah,
Just
your question,
just
please.
one question to Jay. Jay, thank you for the nice presentation. Just in terms of tariff, PPA tariff. Here in Tonga, we have 15 US per kilowatt in one PPA. In the best price we have is 11 US cents. So I just want to compare to Hawaii. What is the best PPA price there?
So the projects we've just recently been approving are in that one slide I showed you, between 8 and 13 cents. And those are solar projects paired with storage. And I want to be careful with it. We had the pricing of the solar only projects was public as well. Or we have one of those projects developed prior to that was 9 cents. I think the direct to grid ones were, well, the storage, almost doubled the price in most cases. So the same projects bid multiple versions, with storage, without storage, different lengths. And in our case, when we did the evaluations, the valuation is based not on lowest cost necessarily. We looked at highest net present value over the term. If that makes sense. When you do the simulation, basically the storage allowed you to offset much more of the higher cost power in the evening. But even though you're paying more for that resource, you're getting a lot more benefit from it. You were able to displace high cost diesel at night instead of, we already have an abundant amount of solar in the middle of the day. So the cost of energy is low. So that makes sense. We already at a point where, it was more than worth it to pay a premium for the storage.
Yeah, okay. I think that's the last question. And in the interest of time, I think we better move on to the next session. But before we do that, Jay, I understand that you have to leave because you have other commitments to attend to. But on behalf of the Pacific regulators and the partners, we would like to sincerely thank you for your time and your effort in talking to us and share your experience and your insights with the PIC. We do hope that in the future, if we request for similar peer-to-peer learning, you will be prepared to also again assist the regulators from the Pacific. Thank you so much.
Great to meet all of you. You have my contact information, so feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Jay. Bye-bye.
Yeah, take care.
Yeah, thank you, colleagues. Our next session will be with the Blue Pacific Alliance. Our next speaker will be Mr. Hank Rogers, the founder of Blue Planet. Mr. Rogers will share his experience from the perspective of an advocacy organization working with the power utilities, with the Public Utilities Commission to implement the 100% renewable energy mandate. He will also provide a brief update of what they share at COP in Scotland their mission to accelerate seeds to transition to 100% renewable energy like Hawaii. But before I give the floor to Mr. Rogers, I invite Samantha to play the video now of Blue Planet's experience and plans. Thank you, Sam.
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Mr. Rogers.
Okay, sorry, I'm on the other side of the world. I'm in Ibiza, and it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm in a very bad location. So, so I'm struggling to get the connection. So my background is computer games. It's not the how can I say? I'm not an electrical engineer or anything like that. But 15 years ago, I found my mission in life, and my mission is to end the use of carbon-based fuel. And I decided, because my home is Hawaii, to start in Hawaii. I came to this conclusion after an ambulance ride with 100% blockage of the Widowmaker. That's another 100%. Obviously, I survived. But in that ambulance, I said to myself, no, I'm not going. I still have stuff to do. And I found my first mission in the back of the newspaper. It says the newspaper article said, we're going to kill all the coral in the world by the end of the century. And I said, that's crazy. No, we are not. And so I formed the Blue Planet Foundation to first end the use of carbon-based fuel in my home, Hawaii. And so this is the Blue Planet Foundation. And rather than me explaining, I'm going to have my niece, when she was 7-year-old, explain it. Can somebody run the video? Are we back live? Are we live? Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you.
Okay. All right. So that's basically the history of the Blue Planet Foundation. And what we mostly do is we create legislation and we lobby. And then when it goes into law, then it becomes the jurisdiction of the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission. And that's when we intervene and make sure that the law gets properly implemented. Our most famous, well, we have several famous ones, I guess. We added a barrel tax of $1 per barrel of oil that gets imported into Hawaii, and that dollar gets spent on renewable energy and food security. Our biggest claim to fame, of course, is the 100% mandate. We won in 2040, the politicians won in 2050, we settled for 2045. 2045 is a good date. It's the 100th anniversary of the United Nations. So I'd like to get it done by 2045. And after we actually had the mandate, the utility, who had been fighting us all along, all of a sudden changed and said, hey, you know what? We looked at it. We can actually do this by 2040. We did a calculation. That would save ratepayers $7 billion between now and 2045. So there's a huge amount of savings involved in switching over to renewable energy. And more recently, we worked with the utility to change their business model. So now they make more money the quicker they switch to renewables. So everybody in Hawaii is lined up. The people are lined up, the government is lined up, and the utility is lined up. I'd just like to say a couple of things. You know, we are islanders. We are friendly, we are warm. We like to make music, we like to sing. We each have a word that means aloha, and we mean it. We are islanders. Our food is expensive. Our rents are high. Our salaries are low. Our beaches are shrinking and hurricanes are coming. Our climate is changing. We have this, the most in common. We pay the most for energy. We have wind, we have solar, we have waves, we have geothermal. Why do we buy oil? Why do we buy diesel? Why do we buy LNG? Why do we buy coal? Why do we buy fossil fuel? This is what they taught us. They taught us how to buy fossil fuel from them. We believed them. Well, we don't believe them anymore. We don't need them anymore. We can make our own free energy. It's just like we make our own oil wells, only our oil wells are drilling for wind, solar, geothermal, wave, OTEC, renewable energy. 6, the money to transform every island in the world is there. That's one of the things that they decided at the COP. Once we make the transition, our people will have cheap energy, our utilities will have more profits. We are going to switch to 100% renewable energy by 2045. We will do this. And that's my message from Ibiza at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Rogers, for that intervention, for sharing the insights about Blue Planet Alliance and also the foundation. Thank you so much. I understand that we now have to move to the next session with Mana Pacific, and then we'll go to the Q&A and the plenary discussion as the last session of the workshop.
I almost forgot to mention there. Sorry, can I say one more thing?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we created the Blue Planet Alliance to do what we did in the rest of the world. Yeah, so we have the Blue Planet Alliance and to help island countries specifically to achieve 100% renewable energy. And we're working together with Mana Pacific, who actually has the technical know-how to make this happen. So we will help on the legislative side and they will help on the technical side. This is something that can be done and it will be done and everybody will be better. Thank you from Ibiza. Bye.
Thank you very much. Yeah, okay. Our next speaker is Ms. Samantha Frick, the Director of Business Development of Mana Pacific, and she will elaborate on developing a renewable energy project in Hawaii in collaboration with the State of Hawaii Public Utilities Commission and community-based asset owners and off-takers. She will also summarize Mana Pacific's new solar impulse efficient solution, the Moana Pledge, a Trans-Pacific initiative to accelerate clean technology adoption in a manner that is profitable and harmonious with the people and the planet. Thank you very much, Samantha.
Thank you so much. Hello, thank you all so much for joining us today. I am Samantha Frick. Like Aquila said, I'm the Business Development Director for Mana Pacific, and I'm based on the island of Maui in Hawaii. But I'm really hoping that the situation will change really soon and we'll all be able to do this next time in person. I first saw the benefits of renewable energy and the important role the regulator plays in the process of transitioning to renewable energies when I worked in an energy regulator office myself for a US state of Michigan in their Public Service Commission Renewable Energy Division, where we were implementing a renewable portfolio standard much more modest compared to Hawaii. And it's such an honor to be partnered with Blue Planet Alliance. We both share the mission to accelerate. Okay, one sec, I believe we've got someone go on mute.
It's Lizzie.
All right, got it. Thank you.
Lizzie, excuse me, Lizzie. I think the background noise is coming from you. Could you please mute yourself? Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, you may continue, Sam. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So who is Mana Pacific? Mana Pacific is a social benefit company that develops and finances renewable energy and resiliency projects in Pacific Island countries and territories and in Hawaii. And in a similar way that the regulator's role is to balance utility profit with ratepayer savings and benefit, both in our corporate structure as a benefit company and in our Moana Pledge, our project model for the Pacific is structured with a triple bottom line, which balances people, planet, and project profitability and bankability. Our approach is to unite the Pacific Islands with a simple, agreeable, standardized method by which projects are delivered. And the key is maintained over the life of the system. By aggregating demand in the Pacific, this leads to better pricing from technology vendors and lowers the cost of financing, which lowers the overall cost of energy to utilities. And taking this trans-Pacific aggregated approach also lowers the risk for project investors, which unlocks much needed capital in the region. And under the pledge, the Trans-Pacific Master Power Purchase Agreement includes industry best practices, vendor qualification process, a clear path to long-term operations and maintenance of the system that can be done by local workforce. And if workforce development, capacity building is necessary to do that to maximize local social and economic benefit, that's included in there as well. And we're really pleased to announce that the Moana Pledge was recently certified by Solar Impulse as an efficient, scalable, and profitable solution to protect the environment. And what I wanted to share today, just in the theme of the workshop, is a Hawaiian example from the perspective of a developer. Moana Pacific is developing a project as part of a utility program called Community-Based Renewable Energy on the island of Molokai in Hawaii. And we're doing this with an independent power producer, which is made up of community members that have formed an electric community cooperative on the island. And together we host community meetings that is open to the public, and we solicit their opinion and feedback on various aspects of the project. Everything from what sort of workforce development and capacity building is necessary on the island so we can keep as many jobs associated with this project with the locals on the island and keep that economic benefit going over the lifetime of the project, to cultural considerations, as well as getting their opinion about how they would like the design of the system and the components of the system. Are the components safe, sustainable, recyclable? All of this, we've gathered the feedback to ensure that people and planet are an aspect of the project. This is incorporated. This is that community piece that Jay was really underscoring that is important, that needs to be incorporated more, and that the regulators in Hawaii are definitely taking that into account and improving in their process currently, which we're really pleased to be a part of that. So we've taken what we've learned, we've met with the utility, and we've met with the Hawaiian PUC to improve this process of incorporating the community, the sustainability of overall projects. We've provided feedback and suggestions to improve the utilities RFP for this program. We'd be happy to answer more questions about this during the Q&A. But I wanted to introduce now our founder and president, John Miller. He's still in the UK after some exciting weeks at COP26, and he's here to tell us more. So John, I will hand it over to you.
Aloha and talofa, everyone. Banaka. Yeah, as Sam said, I'm still in London here. COP was definitely difficult. As we saw on the main stage, we didn't get, of course, what we wanted. And then some other lessons learned, this is the first, giant gathering for the United Nations to get everybody together. We took rapid COVID tests every single day, rapid flow tests, lateral flow tests, to try to help us minimize getting it. But Hank didn't have a chance to tell you, but Hank Rogers actually got COVID as soon as he landed. So he was out for the entire duration of COP. Then we lost James Elmore from Island Innovations. Bryce, who's also on the call here, was with us on our team. He was out probably, I think, in the first 5 days. And then after COP, I just tested positive on 3 lateral flows. And now I have my PCR test I'm waiting for, and most likely be going into quarantine and stuck in London. So just something to think about as the islands decide to start opening up or not. We took significant precautions, had tons of testing, and it was still a difficult situation. But in short, just to give you an idea of SIDS, or COP26, I think one of the best ways to wrap it up was the Attorney General and Minister for the Economy of Fiji, Ayaz Saeed Kayum, said, basically, one of the most frustrating things was, they addressed some of the SIDS, submissions, basically trying to get direct financing for the loss and damages from, the damage from climate change from the worst polluters. And basically that was kind of denied on the fact and the basis that it was a last minute submission. only to see we were there Friday night. COP was extended because negotiations are going into the night. Fingers crossed something was going to happen, and sure enough, last minute, they came in and went ahead and changed the terminology of coal, going from phase out to phase down, which is a very significant loss of the line in the sand that we had drawn. So it's definitely disappointing. But one of the things I want to remind you guys, as Pacific Islanders, I think this is the front lines of the Pacific. The Pacific Islands have always been moonshot thinkers. Navigating the Pacific Islands. This is a chance for us to kind of lead the way and be by example. So well, COP26 is disappointing. I know we did a lot of significant building of alliances, for the Pacific Islands. One of the most exciting things coming up is in February 16th and 17th. President Whips will be hosting the Our Oceans Conference in Palau. So we're working to help support that. The U.S. State Department is also sponsoring that. Peace Boat USA is looking at trying to get their boat down there with 2,000 additional staterooms to be able to support additional delegates. Blue Planet Alliance is also assisting. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to kind of all rally around, and carry on this momentum after COP26, because I think COP26 is a lot of talking. It's really about who's actually going to show up and walk the walk and walk the talk. And I think that's where the Pacific Islands can kind of do that by example. And this opera event, I think, also being another example. Here it is, less than a week after COP26, and the PUC regulators are getting together and already kind of talking about how we address climate change. And so at the end here, I just want to thank you guys for this, because two reasons. One, I was a nuclear engineer in the Navy, of 11 years. One of the best ways that we learned was getting together and lessons learned, talking about problems and what went right and what went wrong between different operating units. I think this is one of the best ways to learn. I think these were great questions. And then two, my late mentor, High Chief Utue Malai, one of the 11 co-founders of the Pacific Power Association. One of his, things he had talked about, he really wanted to do after establishing the second public bank in American Samoa was helping, establish, PUC regulators in the Pacific and even in American Samoa. And I know that he would be very proud of all the work you guys do, and exciting that this is taking off. So I'm just, honored and humbled to be able to help you guys do this. And I think this is super exciting. But thank you so much. And we hope to see you guys at the next one that they're going to attend for the Pacific Power Association. And then, of course, the Our Oceans Conference in Palau, I think, is going to be an exciting thing for the entire Pacific. Thank you guys again. Mahalo.
Yeah, thank you, John. Shem, you would like to continue, or that's the end of the Mana Pacific session?
That's the end of our presentation. We can move on
Okay.
to the next segment.
Okay, thank you. So we have reached the final session, which is the Q&A and the plenary discussion. And please, regulators throughout the Pacific, don't hesitate to ask your question now to any of the speakers. And I have also prepared a few questions to all the energy regulators to help prompt and guide our discussions during this session. But first of all, I will give the opportunities to regulators if you wish to ask any questions in relation to COP26, or you need further clarification on the work of the Blue Pacific Alliance or Mana Pacific. This is your opportunity. Thank you.
Aquila, this is
Yeah.
Francois Rogers from Blue Planet Alliance. If you don't mind, I just wanted to share a link that is relevant to the topic that we have today. There was a portal that we created back at the Alliance. If I could just share very quickly.
Yeah. Please go ahead, Francois.
Yes, so
And
this is the
share the link.
screen. It was developed in partnership with the Hawaiian Electric Company. Every 30 minutes, the raw data from the electric company is sent to our portal, and we're able to show you in real time on how much megawatt is being used, but also it shows the 7-day average as well as how much the energy breakdown is. So in a second, you will see the next screen come up. So at this particular evening part that's happening on Oahu, we have 14% clean energy, 86% fossil fuel. We'll further go down to breaking down the actual energy usage on the island. So you can see waste, solar, coal, oil, not much wind today. So we created something like this to mostly to use it as a public education to we brought it in school campuses, malls, more public areas where children, a lot of college students could learn from it, use it for reports. But also, we all know there is a weather report that we always listen to in the news. And in Hawaii, we have what we call a surf report, where surfers will look to see what the wave height is for the day or the next day. So we said, why not there be an energy report? So we actually had this on TV shows a couple of times as well too, but it's to put that on people's top of mind. So it's kind of something unique that we developed that was a tool to communicate, to make people understand what does energy really mean. So maybe something that could be replicated probably easily. It's just raw data coming from the stuff, but if anyone's interested, this is something that we could share as a knowledge, and maybe it's something could be used for sort of the community outreach pieces that Chairman Griffin was mentioning earlier. So I put a link inside the chat room, so you could copy and paste onto a website to view further closer if interested. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Francois. I think it's very interesting because this is a live display of the power generation in Hawaii, or the Hawaiian Electric.
Yes, this is for Oahu specific, but it shows 1120 megawatts as a total. And then the low high on the left side shows on the every day that we went by. Our high peak was on Friday. Naturally, people are having, getting together and whatnot. And then it shows different highs and lows. So it's kind of interesting to see that flow. Yeah. So please copy and paste the link onto your bookmark. So if you want to look at closer, you could take a look at it. Naturally, it changes throughout the day and throughout the month and whatnot. So yeah, but something interesting to share.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sure most of the regulators in the Pacific will find this very useful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and any questions from any of the regulators?
If there's no questions, maybe Aquila, I have a couple of questions maybe we could ask and then maybe get some feedback. That would work?
Yeah.
I guess two questions, for the regulators here is, one is, do any of the regulators, do you guys think, having a large software package that could bring, basically help aggregate financing, aggregate competitive bidding, using blockchain to make it transparent and bringing the islands together, are there any initial major hurdles you think that might make that, difficult to implement? And then my second question would be, and you don't have to answer this here, but like maybe on the chat box or later by email, we'll send out an email. We'd like to know if any of you would like to participate in helping kind of put together the Moana Pledge. We're looking for people from youth to different heads of state, as well as regulators and utility members to kind of help us curate the final piece of this to make sure it works for all the different Pacific Islands and it's made for the, by the Pacific Islanders. So we'd love to have people participate and, they'd want to do that. So yeah, I just love, put that out for you guys to maybe answer.
Yeah, any takers from the regulators in response to John's questions?
Aquila, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Tuti, please.
Yes, all the presentations from the chairman all the way down to now has been very informative. And, for me personally, out of Palau, we don't have a lot of experience. We're learning on the job trainings. And so any kind of support that helps us go to one spot and figure out, this PPA has been proposed in Samoa. Is it the same as the one in Palau? How do we figure out these things, and how do we share each other's regulations, and how do we share each other's enforcement practices? And that's one of the reasons why I'm very supportive of operates, figure out how to do that for us as regulatory bodies. Of course, we're small, we're island nations, and so a lot of us have different hats. Anything dealing with climate change, NDCs, as well as energy security is all part of some of the work that we go in and out of. So in terms of promoting anything outside of the energy sector, I personally will support how do we figure out how to connect people to the Mana Pledge and connect it to also the Palau Pledge in Palau, so I can connect you guys to those contexts. And so we're not just a regulatory body for energy. Let's also continue to work, reach out and see how we can make all these climate change work come together. On my other hat, I also work with invasive species. So it's kind of like, energy, invasive species, climate change. So consider Palau as a partner, and we'll just do the best we can with what we have. Right.
Yeah, thank you, Tuti. Any other response? Yeah, if not, I'll ask my first question to the regulators. As the energy regulator in your respective countries, what are some of the challenges that you are confronted with in the country's transition to 100% renewable energy? As the energy regulator, we are here with the OPRA members and also some of the non-OPRA members. As the regulator of energy in your country, what are some of the challenges that you are confronted with in the energy transition in your country to 100% renewable energy? Tuti, you'd like to take the floor?
Apologies, I'm just gonna let you know, Aquila, I'm gonna make my intervention now, and then I have to step out to a meeting because of politics. This is the issue we have in Palau. We're meeting with ADB here, the ADB office in Palau. We're asking for their assistance, and maybe this is something the opera can think about in the future. Is third-party review of some of the processes that are going on. So specifically the AFPAC, the automatic fuel cost adjustment, and that is part of the utilities company here in Palau. Every quarter they have to adjust the price of electricity based on the fuel price. My political leaders in Palau do not believe that the utilities corporation is following the right process, even though we've outlined what the formula looks like and how do we get that information and how we plug it in. They don't believe the regulatory body because they think we're both in cahoots with each other. Because basically they do the adjustment for the tariff and then they send it to our office for approval. And we do our own review also at the same time. And we write our approval letter or not approval letter to raise and lower the tariff. And so one of the challenges has been how do we not only have a third party kind of on retainer that can help us meet these individual issues of we have to plan for future development plans and stuff, but things like this, like a one-off, that is not just say, let's review the process and how they incorporate the fuel prices for electricity in Palau, but let's see if we could just do it all over the other countries so we have it ready as a third party from SPC or from whatever company that can go ahead and say, yeah, their process is properly done. A sort of an audit is what I'm thinking. So I'm actually going to go now just around the corner to meet with the ADB guys to request that particular services. So to see how it works out. So Chairman Musar, let's see if that's something we can kind of put it into our little pocket of opera processes that are there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tuti. Thank you very much. Yeah. Any other responders, takers?
Thank you, Pula. Just to add on Tuti, some of the challenges. I'm just talking about the Tonga context. Here, so far we only 2 PPAs now signed. So the first one was the regulator just engaged at the end of the negotiation process. But luckily, ADB was funding some consultants to assist during the procurement process up to the endorsement of the PPA. So the second one was much better. We were engaged in the middle, not at the beginning, but just in the middle. So hopefully the third one we will engage at the beginning. Just because we are reviewing our concession contract every 5 years. So the recent one was just signed by January this year, and we have a clause there, all the step by step for the PPA negotiation process. For example, the regulator engaged in the procurement process, so it has to be transparent. Why we are picking the best one, a PPA? Why we are not picking the other PPA? So it has to be transparent, and it has to be the commission has to be involved in from the beginning. So
yeah, but
just to add to the challenges, the land, the ownership of the land, it's take months, years for the negotiation of the land ownership to release the land for. Basically, Tonga is just a flat island, so obviously only solar and wind are the RE project here in Tonga. So it has to be a big piece of land for the solar farms. Now we are introducing the rooftops, but the PPAs has to be a solar farm. So that is one of the challenges. I was asking earlier to the chairman PUC, Jay, on PPA price tariff, just to compare. Of course, I know some of the PPA price in the mainland US is up to 1 cent. I remember I read a journal, there's a PPA price 1 cent. And I was very, very surprised. He was saying that Hawaii is the best price is 8 or 9 cents. So, I mean, it's, of course, it's the transportation cost, but it can be better than 8 or 9 cents. So here, the best price here is 11 cents. But we are very, very far from where the equipment for the solar farms. So I was very surprised. The best price in Hawaii is just 9 cents. So I just need some clarification from you, John, on the PPA price. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a a couple of things there that I'd like to address. I think a lot of good stuff there. I want to start with the transparency part. I think one of the unique things that we're looking at doing is we're using blockchain, which will basically the entire procurement process will be basically you'll have, it's called NFTs. You'll have control of ownership and be fully transparent of how the equipment is transferred, as well as the contracts would be fully transparent. And to your point there, I think during this process, this would be a great time that we can maybe engage with Opera for you guys to kind of review the actual software process, because we can do is basically, like you said, engage the regulators to come in and review the current process in the beginning, and then again in the middle, and then kind of certify at the end. And maybe having you guys take a look at this process would be good to help us kind of build it correctly, to make sure there's the proper engagement points. But the best part is by using blockchain, which we can have a separate presentation on that, whether it's using the Water Pledges software or whether or not you guys use another software using blockchain. The best part is every transaction is recorded, and can't be modified. So that way, if anything was done wrong, you can always go back and kind of look at, who did what and who did what, when and where. And that way basically kind of helps us defer, from basically, sometimes the corrupt activities or other things that happen. So again, blockchain is something that I think you guys will start to see a lot more about. And we were talking, it's a big part of COP this year was basically using blockchain because, the key to this is we have to be able to trust what's happening, especially, to happen fastly and move us, accelerate renewable energy. There has to be a lot of trust in blockchain so far as kind of our best tool to give full transparency, including oftentimes to the public, we can give them to and to the government officials. That kind of everybody can kind of see what's going on. And you really can't hide anything behind the curtain anymore. Another thing you talked about was pricing. One of the things that we're working on with them want to pledge is the idea is like when, oftentimes the bidding for one project, it might be 10 megawatts, 20 megawatts, maybe we'll see a 50 megawatt in some of the larger islands. But still, those are very small projects on the scale. So there's not much economies of scale in pricing. So when you see 1 and 2 cent pricings in the mainland, there's multiple things going on there. One is typically those projects are 100, 200, maybe 500 megawatts of solar or wind storage. So it's major economies of scale. So your pricing is significantly in a whole different volume pricing. The other thing that they do is, we have federal subsidies in the United States. Many states also have state subsidies that also help lower that price. So the federal government's providing subsidies, the state government's providing subsidies. And then now the utilities and IPPs are leveraging a new thing they're just doing, it's called price forecasting. So an Xcel Energy and big nuclear and solar utility in the Midwest, they're getting very low pricing. They're asking their IPPs to basically forecast what the pricing of solar and battery pricing is going to be because they're expected to continue to decline. And they basically kind of engage in like a hedging thing. So the other two subsidies I think would be something to be nice in the Pacific Islands, but this price hedging is something that they do, but it's almost, I would say, a little too aggressive for the Pacific because if the prices go backwards, then sometimes the utility has to flip that bill. But the ways that we are trying to leverage those things in the Pacific here is one is economies of scale. The idea is by using the Moana Pledge, if Tonga, if you want 3 10 megawatt projects, and then Vanuatu needs 5 megawatts, and then American Samoa needs 50 megawatts, and some, and Tuvalu needs, another 2 megawatts, right? If we can consolidate those all together and say you'd all need these different PPAs, you need this much solar, the idea is we can consolidate that order to the manufacturers for the modules as well as the battery manufacturers. And by purchasing now 100 or 500 megawatts of solar at a time or wind at a time or whatever technology you want, the idea is you guys can get that same pricing as if it was one large 500 megawatt project, but then each utility or each IPP in that utility market would then basically get those components based on the smaller project. So we're trying to basically take these smaller projects in the islands and consolidate them to get the same pricing that we're seeing in the mainland with those large projects. And so, yeah, we'll later, maybe if we want, we can have another presentation that can kind of explain how that part's going to go. The other part that we're looking at doing is on the subsidies. Is right now in the Pacific Islands, there's not a lot of subsidies. We either see grants, which basically finance the entire project as a grant, but those kind of dry up quickly, or it's all capital-induced financing. And so what we're trying to do is in the U.S. mainland, one of the fastest reasons that they accelerated the adoption of renewable energy was a 30% federal tax incentive. So basically 30% of the project's capital expenses were subsidized by the federal government. And so we're talking with the Green Energy Fund, as well as some other grant initiatives and some other philanthropic groups about basically providing, rather than a full grant or for a project, is basically splitting up that. And we're basically trying to provide a form of a subsidy through the Moana Pledge where independent power producers can still finance and sell projects to utility companies, but we can also provide maybe a 30% subsidy to that financing to those projects. One of the partners we're leveraging right now is actually the Development Finance Corporation, the US government. We're looking at using them to basically help provide both a subsidy on the capital investment for projects in the Pacific Islands, as well as providing a financial backstop. So instead of having a sovereign guarantee from the local government, the idea is that if the US government can come in there and backstop the loans of our financing, then they won't need these sovereign guarantees anymore. And again, to help accelerate the investment and basically reduce the risk in these projects. So I hope that answers your questions. But again, we basically taken a lot of these questions you guys had in the past and then trying to incorporate as many of these as we can into the Moana Pledge to help, leverage the things we're seeing everywhere else on our island, so we can kind of get those same benefits as well.
Yeah, thank you, John.
You,
I think
John.
we can take a few more questions before we finish. I'll ask two more questions. One is to the energy regulators again. Some of the energy regulators in the countries are relatively new, and you need appropriate training to build your in-house capacity. So what do you think of this kind of capacity building, the peer-to-peer learning to help you build your capacity or your team?
Is that to me?
Well, to you and also to the regulators.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first real quick. I mean, I think this is the key. I mean, I think it's strength is through unity. We call it lokahi in Hawaii. And it's through unity. We're all paddling to one canoe. I think this is how we basically learn from each other. We gain strength from each other, and inspire each other. So I think this is absolutely essential. Funding is important. So, we need to make sure we find ways to make sure opera is funded, as well as what Jay said, sometimes getting a staff behind you guys so that you're not, you guys wear multiple hats. On a submarine, we're a very small crew, and I had to have 5 different jobs, and the more hats you wear, the harder it is to focus. So, I think we'll work with SPC and find out, other granting opportunities to make sure you guys are funded moving forward. And B, I think we're going to take this on as a way in the Moana Pledge, is there a way that, as we finance these renewable energy projects, that we can have a tariff in there that helps finance, opera and other things that are just as important to make this a success? Because I think, there's many components here that have to work in unity, and they all have to be supported. And I think opera and what you guys are doing as regulators is vitally important. So, we'll definitely take a look at this and how we can make sure we can empower you guys more.
Yeah, thank you, John. And any regulators who would like to respond to that question? What do you think of the peer-to-peer learning like this to build your capacity or your team?
Good luck.
Masi, yeah, go ahead, please.
Yes, can I make a comment? Yes, I totally agree with the peer-to-peer learning. From my experience, we were. I was at the audit office, and there's a regional hub for all the auditors office in the Pacific. That is what they do. All the new staff, they arrange, like looking for topics, areas where they need the training. So they arrange a workshop, let's say 2 weeks or 1 week. So they go to Samoa. It's like exchange students. 2 from Samoa comes to Tonga office, 2 from Tonga office go to Samoa office. It's more or less like an attachment. So, like they pick up what they not good at that office. So, but as for this exercise, of course we know what is our roles, but the problem is how you do your roles. Experience from let's say PUC can fill in the gaps in our staff here. That is just the comments, Akula. Totally agree with the peer-to-peer learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other regulator who would like to respond to that? Yeah, Perolini, would you like to make a comment? Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Well, thank you, Aquila. Well, I appreciate this workshop and being able to be introduced to Mana Pacific Impact Company while having exposed to different companies and also expanding our network in the energy sector is very important, especially during this time where we cannot travel. I think virtually it's important to be connected and sharing ideas. This is a Pacific way, is Talanoa, or we talk over the issues, and we all know the goals that our nations have in meeting our 100% renewable energy goals. But the challenges are also of the similar because we have very limited resources here in the Pacific Islands. So we appreciate the knowledge being shared and the information from Mana Pacific, and we will definitely use those ideas, and we will keep in contact on, because you are more experienced in implementing these renewable energy projects, but somehow in the Pacific, these are very new. And that is also the issue with our utilities. We're very used to the normal or our option of fossil fuel generation, whereas we're all trying to move and integrate our systems with the renewable sources. So sharing your expertise with us is much appreciated, and we would definitely look forward to continuing this peer-to-peer partnership moving forward. Faftai.
Yeah, Faftai Perlini. Yeah, and then the last question for the day before we close this session. I would like to direct that to those of you who attended the COP26. And could you please share the main outcomes or commitments that may impact the global energy transition and the net zero carbon emission? To you, John, Hank, or Francois, if you'd like to share some. I know that John has briefly shared his experience, but what about the commitments or the outcome of the meeting and how they are going to impact the global energy transition and the carbon and the net zero carbon emission by 2050? Thank you.
Francois, you still there?
Yes, I am here. Sorry.
Do you want to answer that one? You want to repeat it?
Can you repeat the question? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, thank you. I just, if you can share the made outcomes / commitments from the COP26 or the agreed document that may impact the global energy transition, including the transition in the Pacific Island countries, and the net zero carbon emission targets.
Okay. It's a very a huge,
very loaded question.
Okay, yes, a loaded question. Yes. Well, as founder Hank Rogers presented earlier, the alliance was formed to replicate what was done in Hawaii. Hawaii's transition was never overnight. We always tell this. It's something that took years and years of working closely with the utility and the PUC. And not only that, but also the community and stakeholders. I was part of the transition from the very beginning in 2008, and it led to us pursuing the 100%. And come 2015 or so, we're finally past the law. But that alone took 3-4 years of trial and error, and that's how we achieved it. And then following that, 2 years later, we kept on trying, and that's when we got the utility to have a favorable transition. As the faster they go to renewables, they're able to earn more profit out of that. So the stakeholders were happy, and that's why everything is going the right direction. After we passed the 2015 100% mandate, California followed us. They looked at our example, and we contributed to some of those ideas. And now California has it, and so has 14 other states. So as you can see, once somebody does it, it's always good to learn from each other, and other states will follow. So we're looking at as a model of doing this with other countries. But our most immediate focus is the SIDS with the Small Island Developing Nations. And John mentioned briefly earlier, our first opportunity is arriving with Palau. I know Tuti's on here right now, but we've been talking to the president directly and Ambassador Seed. We are forming a working group starting next week to go over specific plans on how we could use this February Our Oceans event as a platform to convene island leaders from other countries and hopefully come up with a sense of direction. John reflected that maybe big countries are not ready to commit and do stuff, but it doesn't mean that we cannot do it alone. We could start making a big noise in the Pacific and say that we are on the right track. We are trying to make it right. So our goal is to help nations such as yours working with Mana Pacific and making sure that you have the right tools and the necessary information so that we could make the transition smooth. Again, it's not always going to be a immediate result, and that's okay because we know getting in trenches is very hard, but knowing that there are other precedents out there, there's other information out there that you guys could gain from, I think that's what the Alliance was formed on. And this is why our name is the Blue Planet Alliance, to have an alliance of every global citizens in the world. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're open to bringing in more expertise, such as PUC Chairman Griffin does here today. We have another session at the end of the month with the head of Hawaiian Electric Company, who will be sharing his story, and that will be another step. But more workshops like this, more discussions, the more we could be in the same dialogue, I think we could achieve something bigger. And I think that's what we're trying to accomplish. So hopefully that gets a little overview of what we're trying to accomplish as a team. Again, we are a team. Everybody here should be part of the team. So we're welcome with open arms and let's work together. Yes.
Yeah, much appreciated, Francois. Yeah, any other comments from anyone? Okay. If not, I know that John has already shared his insights from COP26 from Glasgow. So now I will. I'll hand over the floor to Chairman Masi for any last remarks before we conclude this workshop. Masi, please.
Thank you, Abdullah. We will continue on tomorrow, Sam.
No.
So,
We will not be continuing tomorrow, but we should follow up with everyone with the survey to figure out what the next session should be, what the topics should be about. Be happy to work with you on that, Chairman.
thank you, Sam. Just once again, thank you, John and Sam from the Mana Pacifica, and of course the other team in Akula. Akula is always there for assisting us, the Regulators office in the Pacific. We are more than happy to have these kinds of training or talanoa. It's of course us is the one who benefit from all the trainings. I can say this one is a training for us, but from here we can talk further on some assistance from Mana Pacific. And, we appreciate on behalf of OPRA members, we would like to thank you all for all the assistance. And we are very blessed to have those organizations to assist us, of course, in developing our staff, our capacity for our e-projects, and just for the members to make use of all the opportunities we have from from organization like you guys by get back to you guys by emails if they have some questions which comes up to their minds later. So you guys are there to answer, share your experiences, of course, for us to learn from. So malo opito for all the spending your time as well. Ila, John, Sam, Francis, and of course the rest of the team. Thank you.
Yeah, malo apito, Chairman Masi. And I'm sure this will not be the last. This is the first, and it's definitely not going to be the last. To work with the Blue Planet Alliance as well as Mana Pacific in organizing similar peer-to-peer learning events in the future. And to all the energy regulators in the Pacific, thank you very much for joining and taking your time off your very busy schedule throughout the day to join this 2-hour workshop. And also to other Pacific senior officers from other Pacific Island countries. And also this is an open invitation to other Pacific Island countries who are not members of OPRA. OPRA is open under the funding from ADB. We would like more Pacific Island countries to join OPRA and to also benefit from the TA that will be funded by ADB. So with those words, I would like to thank you once again and say goodbye to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
all.
Bye-bye.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.